What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman. I'm here with Football with Oz, Austin, for episode 15 of Against the Blitz. And we are coming at you just right after the combine kind of wraps up. They might still be doing a few drills. I'm not entirely sure, but it's basically over. Day 4 is done. So we are going to bring you our positional winners, losers, risers, fallers, guys that we felt answered questions over the combine weekend. So, Austin, did you watch the whole thing? Were you present for a lot of it? What were your thoughts early on?
Almost all minutes of all 4 days. I like during work, when I got home, I'd have to rewatch certain position players, but I wanted to make sure that I was educated as possible coming into the draft, since it's my wheelhouse. I have to be knowledgeable about it. So I watched all 4 days of this so you guys don't have to. That's what I'm here for.
Well, good, because like I was saying pre-show, I got stuck moving a family member, so I was kind of caught breaking my damn back instead of sitting on the fucking couch like I would have preferred to, but that's what you do for family, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, so risers, fallers, winners, losers. We might as well start with the quarterback position, which, as we know, the guys that we probably would have liked to see decided to sit it out because they're too cool for school. Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders. It is what it is. Who was your biggest winner / riser from the quarterback room?
It's an easy one. Jackson Dart. He was the only guy in this room that really has a chance to work his way into the first round somehow. I think that he was also by far the best thrower on all levels. The only other guys that I thought impressed are guys that aren't really even going to get drafted probably. So yeah, he really separated himself from the pack. And I think that he's kind of worked his way towards Shadur Sanders. I think that they're a little bit closer now than people before.
Yeah, I thought, Jackson Dart's been probably the most polarizing quarterback in the entire class, because it's there are reports, there are people out there that will say Jackson Dart's easily QB3 and, he's looked excellent. And then there are people that are like, Jackson Dart, this guy fucking blows. I feel like you're either on one end of the spectrum or the other when it comes to Jackson. But I think he did all he could as far as the combine goes, like you kind of mentioned. So good for him. I mean, I don't think anybody's necessarily rooting on his downfall, but he feels like one of those players where that people are kind of pitting themselves against each other, trying to figure out what kind of prospect he really is.
I think that they're afraid to everyone mentions Zach Wilson when they come up with late round risers, Will Levis, somebody that kind of came out of nowhere and started killing it. So I think that they're afraid to overrate quarterbacks, but some people view him as a guy worthy of a top 10 pick, which some people think's insane. And some people have rated him a 4th or 5th round pick. So it's kind of, I think that people are being a little over dramatic on both sides. I think that he's very clearly just a day 2 quarterback, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. It's he can be a day 2 guy. It's not the end of the world if that's actually the case. But for my winner riser, I mean, I think Will Howard fit the description. Like you kind of said, no one really did much that was noteworthy for the quarterbacks. Brady Cook, Tyler Show, they did well as far as the athletic score had to show for it. But I thought Will Howard, as far as the more relevant guys go, fit the riser the riser description more than anything. But yeah, I mean, that was really my biggest takeaway from the quarterbacks. It was another position I didn't get to see much of, but Jackson Dart was the clear winner from what my takeaways of the Twitter feed it could tell me. I read.
Will Howard was one where even though he didn't necessarily throw super clean, everything else about him is everyone's raving about. He measured in really big. Mm-hmm. And he apparently has some of the best characters / leadership of any quarterback out of this class. So yeah, it sounds like some teams are kind of going to be pretty willing to reach on him, and I wouldn't be shocked to see he's a day 2 guy either.
Yeah, that those traits that you speak to are valued a lot higher than they are valued more to franchises than they are to the people evaluating from the outside.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
That could absolutely be something that drives him up. But as far as the losers go, I felt like one guy led this pack for me because I was very disappointed with his decision, which was Jalen Milroe and his decision not to run the 40. That was like the most contradictory decision of any quarterback prospect in this draft. It's like you have one thing going for you right now, and it's your ability to run fucking straight and how fast you can do it. And he didn't do it. Reinforce yourself a little bit, Milroe, please. Like, I want this guy. I think you could find an angle and manipulate an argument for him to be QB3 somehow. But if he's not going to even run the 40, where I can't point to a combine performance and say, look, he ran a 4.25.
Right.
Like, what am I going to do with that? Your film is as high and low as it gets, and you're not over here running I was very frustrated by that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I've always viewed the combine as just like a marketing weekend for all of these prospects. It's a chance for them to show what they want and to not show what they don't want. He should not have wanted to show off his throwing ability. Like, he is highly inaccurate. He is the most inaccurate quarterback in this class. His mechanics are whack. Like, he is an absolute athlete, though. Like, he would have probably ran in the 4.4s, 4.5s. Like, he would have probably jumped out of the building in the vertical and the broad jump, but he just kind of decided just to throw, and he looked terrible. Like, I don't understand. Like, if he had any QB3 hype, I think it's gone. And like, you've seen guys that we knew were athletic, like Anthony Richardson, who tested anyways, and then just reminded us how much of an athletic freak he is, and he got drafted in the top 10. So, like, Jalen Milroe could have just reminded all of us just how much of a freak athlete he is, and he chose not to. And I think that really hurt him.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, this is a marketing technique. They have full control over their image coming out of this weekend. And he just, like you said, decided to show off his throwing instead of his running, which, like I said, was kind of contradictory. So interesting decision. So I did feel like Milroe was the clear loser. Was he your loser? Did you have someone else?
He was the clear one. I don't think really any other quarterback dropped their stock too much. I mean, I think Dylan Gabriel missed a few throws that he should have made on the out routes, but like, that was really it. There wasn't anything crazy. He was the only one that I think should have showed off something else and didn't. I think everyone else just showed us who we thought they were. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about anybody else.
So we'll move on. We'll go to, I suppose, the running backs. Why not?
Absolutely.
Who was your biggest winner from the weekend for running backs?
I picked a guy that I think kind of helped beat his expectation, and that's Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. So he's a guy I'm a little higher on than most. He's by RB3 for the class. And he is a guy that has every like RB instinct, contact balance, like everything that you could possibly want, durability. But people kind of questioned his athletic ability. They didn't really know if he had that high-end athleticism in him, but he jumped a 38.5-inch vertical, 11 on the broad jump, measured in at 6 foot 220, ran a 4.48. Like, he kind of did everything athletically that you'd want to see from a high-end running back. So I think answering his only question with a positive note really helped him secure like a second-round pick.
Yeah, I saw that Judkins was like the first running back since 2003. Don't quote me on this exact stat, but the first running back since the combine in 2003 to be like 220 plus and to reach like that 31-inch mark. And I think it was his 40 time as well. I'll pull up the stat if I can find it and throw it on screen. But yeah, he definitely answered questions for his build. No one, like you said, no one expected that guy to be, as athletic as he showed off. Maybe college football 25 was not too far off with having his spin move extremely broken for the first,
he can actually do it
of the year, because that's really like the primary reason why anyone knows that guy's, or at least why anyone knew that guy's name earlier in the whole process.
Yeah,
because
they should have
his impact.
He was the most broken player since like Eric, like Madden 20 Eric Dickerson. Like, that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen, and it still works to this day.
I think there was a clip that I saw from one. I watch a guy named K-Mac play Madden often.
Yes, I know K-Mac.
I love K-Mac. The guy's so fucking hilarious. I think it was him that was playing against the Judkins user, and the guy hit the spin move like on the sideline, and I swear to God, like, he made like 6 guys miss. I'm like, 6 guys miss. I'm like, wow, fuck.
I know.
Well, he was, I think, on everyone's list of winners, mine included. I mean, Judkins was phenomenal. I think RB3, I think, could very easily be in the conversation now. Like whether that's I don't think that's a hot take anymore.
No.
A guy that I wanted to mention that I was looking for help on how to pronounce prior to the show, but Virginia Tech running back Bashal Tutton out of Virginia Tech. He ran a 4.32. He was excellent. I mean, the splits were good. He was explosive. He graded out. His RAS score was elite for his explosiveness and his speed. So, Bashal Tutton, I mean, what were your thoughts about him going into the weekend? Did you expect him to be as athletic as he showed?
Yeah, he was the running back that I picked on a post about guys I think will rise after the combine. Because I did watch his tape, and that dude can fly, especially being like a stocky, compact running back. He had some of the best breakaway speed in the class, but I didn't expect him to jump a 40-inch vertical as like a 5'9" running back. That is ridiculous. Like that dude's explosiveness is out of this world, especially coming from, I think he was either a JUCO or HBCU product before he went to Virginia Tech. So like he's only had like a year in like Power 5 training. So that's really, really positive sign for him.
Do you think I kind of felt like you could throw him into like the RB5 conversation. Like, did he rise that much for you, or did you feel like it was just expectation? So he didn't necessarily make that jump.
I think he made a huge jump. I had him floating around my RB10 area because the class is so stacked. Yeah. But I think that I tried redoing my running back rankings today, and I think he rose a little bit. I think I might have even had him around 8, maybe even close to 7. Depends what kind of scheme you run, but like if you're the kind of team that can run, like a zone rushing scheme, get him in open space and let him fly, I would take him pretty early. I think that taking him in the 3rd or 4th would not be dramatic, even the 3rd.
Yeah, I saw Mike McDaniel freaking out about a running back. I can't remember who it was.
I think it was probably Travion Henderson.
I think it was Henderson from the clip I saw. Now, I was thinking also Tutton was probably a guy he was licking his lips at a little bit too, because just another fast running back that McDaniel could over target more than his receivers. So how exciting.
Oh my God.
For losers, who are your running back losers or fallers from the weekend?
There wasn't a bunch. I think a guy that was in that realm of like the RB7 to RB10 realm was Devin Neal from Kansas. He was another super broken college football 25 player. He measured in at around 5'11", 213. It's pretty much what we expected. But he only ran just shy of a 4.6, which was not nearly as fast as a lot of people thought he would.
Damn.
And his 8.5-inch hands kind of hurt his fumbling issue. 8.5-inch hands is well below what you would expect from somebody for ball security issues. So having that coming in a little bit heavier and a lot slower than people thought was not really something that plays to his game very much. So I think that he did drop off a little bit.
Yeah, Devin Neal, like you said, another guy that people know because of college football 25. I wasn't too privy to his fumbling issues, so that hand size correlation is certainly an interesting one when looking at it from an NFL scout perspective. So who knows where Devin Neal goes now? I mean, he was probably like another guy in that RB10 range, 12 range prior. He probably still kind of is if you feel like he didn't fall too much. But if you remade your rankings, that's probably still where he resides. I mean, he obviously didn't just plummet. So
no, I remade him. I think I kind of just put him. I dropped maybe a spot, and that was just when he was next to somebody like Bashal Tutton that just dominated him in that area. Yeah. You have to drop him a little bit, but I didn't. It's not a dramatic fall off. I don't think anybody did so dramatically bad that they're just not gonna no one's gonna fall off that bad.
Yeah, fair enough.
Poor running back.
All right, we'll move on to what do you want to do? Tight ends or receivers? I'll let you direct traffic.
Let's go receiver, because I think that there were a few that were really interesting. All right. I'm curious to know who you picked at receiver, because I had 2 really strong ones.
My receivers, I mean, I was balancing between a couple. I mean, I feel like Luther Burden kind of reminded us that he could be, he was going into this year at least supposed to be one of the best wide receivers in the class. And I feel like Luther Burden did a better job of reminding us why he was he was, supposedly supposed to be that going into the season. I think there were problems like his production this year. Obviously, is the reason why his name is kind of faded away. But something that I will also speak to later in the episode, like production is such a cloudy mirror to try and look at when it comes to any of these guys. So, whether it's his usage or the guys around him in the offense, the play calling, all sorts of factors that could have dropped him. But I feel like Luther Burden probably moved his way back into the later first round with his combine performance. So he was the guy that stuck out to me the most from the weekend.
Yeah. The Luther Burden, obviously, when you see his production fall off by 800 yards, and his teammate Theo Weiss actually outproduced him this year. So it kind of made people wonder: was it was it a Luther Burden problem? Was it a scheme problem? Was it a Brady Cook problem? But it kind of just seemed to be a mixture of all three. He did just come in though. I think he ran a shallow 4.4, 4.41 maybe. He looked really good in all the drills. His hands looked fantastic. Yeah. So I think he kind of helped remind people how good of an athlete he is. And some people even have him up to wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 category. I'm not quite that high, but I do like him still as a late first round pick for sure. Yeah,
it wasn't really his. It was more the drills that from what I saw of Luther Burden and what I was reading, he just it looks solid. Like the word solid, I feel like for Luther Burden is the easiest, quickest way to describe him. He just looks reliable, solid, wide receiver 2 type of guy that you could throw to, and he's going to catch the ball. That's the kind of archetype, the kind of player that I see Luther Burden being, which I know a lot of people like to swing for the fences when it comes to these prospects, but sometimes these are the guys that are the biggest home run hitters for your team, the most reliable ones. So
I actually comped him to Khalil Shakir. He's a very similar player, kind of like a guy from the slot, kind of works best on screens and across the middle. Not really much of a vertical guy, but he just got a pretty nice payday for himself. So being that kind of receiver can still get you really, really good value on an NFL team. And that's actually kind of similar guy to who I had as the winner. Jalen Noel, receiver from Iowa State. He's a super compactly built, almost looks like a running back kind of slot receiver. But he came in, he jumped a 41.5-inch vertical. He came in with 23 reps on the bench of 225, which is absurd for a 5'9" receiver. 11.2 on the broad jump, which was best of all receivers, and then ran a 4.39. So he kind of was I think top 5 to top 6 in every single receiver drill, on top of just showing off really good hands. So I think that he kind of worked his way into that top 10 receiver territory.
Yeah, another guy, 5'9". I mean, benching that much at 5'9". Do you know his arm length by chance?
I believe it was about 29, maybe in 5/8. I think it's 29 inches.
Because they say the shorter the arm length, I guess the easier it is for guys on the bench. Supposedly, I guess I could see how, but I mean, at 5'9" still is your build can only be so big at 5'9". So
I can do one single rep of 225. So to do 23 reps as a guy that's about my weight is pretty crazy, and embarrassing for myself.
I don't even know if I could do. Honest to God. So don't feel bad about yourself. For your loser, your wide receiver loser, who was the guy that came to mind for you?
My loser was probably Tez Johnson. He is one of the smallest receivers to ever even come into the combine. He's about 5'10", about 155 pounds, which is very, very skinny to run a 4.51 40. I'm pretty sure no one has ever been drafted that was 155 pounds that ran a sub 4.5. So I do think he will get drafted because he's a lot better than that. But those are really, really, really bad numbers. He's going to have to really run at his pro day to earn himself a day 2 pick, I think.
Yeah, Tez Johnson. I mean, if you're going to be small, the thing about undersized guys is if you're going to be small, you got to be able to be athletic. And if you're not making up for it there, then that's something I feel like scouts will just completely ding you on. You'll fall down draft boards quick if your size is something that you can't make up for athletically. But Tez, he was a loser for, I think, anybody making a list like this for receivers, unfortunately. But my loser, kind of subjective, but I feel like he kind of deserves it. Isaiah Bond, He's kind of annoying. You don't go up on stage and say, I'm breaking that record tomorrow. You could say, I feel like I have a good chance to do it. And then you go out there and you're not even the fastest receiver running the 40 on your own team. So
no, and he's not the better receiver either. So,
no,
yeah,
exactly. So I do think Bond, being the two-way player he was at times, that will probably alone help his stock. But in terms of being a receiver, I feel like there wasn't much we saw this weekend that I was like, confident in or feeling like it moved him upward. And a lot of, I feel like the interview process, social media being the prime, carrier of it. But
yeah, I appreciate the confidence. I'm always going to appreciate the confidence, but to run, 0.2 of a second slower is pretty bad, especially when you're like, 5'10", 180 something pounds. Right. Never really produced in college. The entire thing was like he has good separation ability, really good speed. Like an NFL team will be the one to get it out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes in and he runs a good 40, but to run I think like an official 4.39, like that's not what he said he'd do, and that's not what we expected him to do. So, yeah, it's a loser just because the discourse around him now is negative coming out of the draft, coming out of the combine, and that's not what you ever want. You never want your stock to be lower, and it is now. So, he does qualify as a loser for sure.
I could be wrong, but I feel like going into this past season, he was he in wide receiver 1 conversations for the next coming class? Like, I feel like it's only gone downhill since the start of this season for Isaiah Bond, and it just continues that way.
I know he got hurt. I know he was battling through an injury at the end of the season, but like even before that, and even in Alabama, he never produced anything really. Like he was putting up like this year Luther Burden stats for his entire career. And that's just not enough to earn you even a second round pick anymore with how deep the receiver class is. So he's kind of pushed himself out of that receiver 10 category. I think guys like Jalen Noel are starting to take over, guys that did produce and guys that did, kind of do what we thought they'd do. I just think Bond's going to fall a round or two probably.
Yeah, unfortunate to see, but who knows? Maybe like to the whole point of the versatility thing, it might keep him up. But we'll move on to tight ends. Who was your tight end winner of the weekend?
So I had a guy that didn't even athletically test. Mason Taylor out of LSU. He's the son of Jason Taylor, the Hall of Fame edge rusher. He is a 6'5", 250-pound tight end. So he has the build. He looks muscular. He did a really good job blocking on the sled, which is pretty huge. I just went away somewhere.
What the hell just happened?
Where'd I go?
What is fucking going on?
I have no idea. All right, Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU, is my winner. He didn't even athletically test. He is just really, really smooth and really, really big. So he came in at about 6'5", 251. He was super smooth on the drills. I don't know if you saw the gauntlet of him, but he literally stayed on the white line. Like it did not move. He was super smooth, caught everything, was clearly the best tight end on the field, as well as having 10-inch hands, which are humongous, and being the son of a Hall of Fame edge rusher, Jason Taylor. So everything about him, from pedigree to size to athleticism to receiver skills, screams a long-term NFL starter, including being a really good blocker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole watching the gauntlet drill is so interesting because like we were kind of talking about with Burden. You can really tell who can stay on their spot and who can't, who can handle the fastball of some of the better quarterbacks. And Mason Taylor, well, unfortunately for him, anytime I hear Taylor and then I hear Jason Taylor and then I think Joy Taylor, but
oh no, he's not Joy Taylor.
No, he's not. But anyway, he was another guy. Hand size. I want to get your thoughts because you're obviously the draft guy here. Does hand size matter for almost every position? Because quarterback, of course, is the one that it matters the most for because of grip and weather, that kind of thing. You mentioned it with running backs, with Devin Neal and his fumbling issue. Do you think hand size is something that matters a lot more than the average NFL fan knows about?
It does, to a degree. I think it more just having big hands is just a really big strength than having tiny hands as a weakness. And Devin Neal has fixed some of his fumbling problems, so it's not a huge deal. That was more about a year or two ago. But people like Joe Burrow, for instance, he's obviously a fantastic quarterback, but he does have limitations as a thrower. I think partially because he can't be out here holding the ball like Josh Allen does. Like he kind of has to hold it a very specific way to make sure he doesn't lose it. As an offensive lineman, like being able to have a stronger and better grip inside shoulder pads is a huge deal. As a receiver, just to have a bigger catch radius with your hands is a pretty big deal. So I think just having big hands is more of a strength than small hands being a weakness, if that kind of makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes complete sense. It's a good point. Like there's no downside to having big hands. So
no, none. Yeah, so it's always going to be a strength.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, my winner for the weekend was a guy that just scored ridiculously, and I'll take the easy pickings. Terrence Ferguson, the Oregon tight end, was unbelievable. He ran the fastest 40 at 4.63. He graded out as elite for the explosiveness. This is, you're looking for a receiving tight end. Like this is kind of, what you're kind of going for. And, I still feel like with all of the tight end talent in this class, I think there are guys more versatile that you're most certainly still going to turn to, like the Tyler Warrens, of course, at the top of the class. But in terms of pure receivers, I think Terrence is still, I think he boosted himself to the top of the pure receivers, or at least pretty close to it. Whereas other guys, which we'll touch on, hurt themselves that fit this archetype. So, just seeing how fast that guy can run, I thought he looked fluid as well. So Terrence Ferguson, I mean, like I said, the easy pickings for the tournament winner.
And he's a smooth guy. Like he looks good on the field too.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even just the easy pick because he did well, but he did kind of have questions about like functional athleticism because he's tall and he's lean, but he's kind of awkward at times on the field. So you kind of wondered if there is an extra gear he can tap into athletically. He doesn't really win after the catch very much, and you kind of wish he did. But seeing that he does have good, 4.63 speed, like there is a possibility now that he can kind of tap into something new. So yeah, that was a good pick.
Yeah, the fluid is something that like you either got it or you don't. Like some guy, you either look like you're coordinated or you don't. And Ferguson, I thought going through the drills, he did look relatively smooth. So the loser, I mean, I wrote down this guy and then I read more about it and didn't change my choice. But for lack of not changing my choice, I guess I'll still go with it and then follow it up with my further education of him. Gunnar Helm, unfortunately, tested atrociously, like made you want to throw up and everyone was going to throw him off everyone's big board. It was bad. And came to find out that the guy like sprained his ankle. Like, was it running the 40?
I think it was when I think that he jumped once. I think that they scrapped it, and then he apparently sprained his ankle on that one, and then ran his official 40 seconds later after spraining it. So yeah, that would definitely affect every single athletic metric you do. But also, he's not that athletic as it is. Like he is not nearly as athletic as the other top 7 tight ends in the class. So I kind of bought it because that's kind of what people expected from him anyways. I mean, he also, fair. I mean, even when you look at him, they're like, he didn't have this like muscular build that a lot of the other tight ends had. He weighed 240 and wasn't very like muscular looking, and then ran a really bad 40. So yeah, that was a bad day for him, even injury aside, just kind of looking at him almost.
Yeah, that's true. It's like you probably didn't expect him to test well, but for him to go, and honestly, like no one knew he hurt himself. Like it was weird.
No.
It came out after the fact, and it's like maybe if he would have like showed that he was limping or something, it would have been like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He looks like he hurt himself, but he didn't. He just kind of did it anyway. Maybe the adrenaline was pumping, and he still ran, and he scored what he did. But yeah, I mean, it would be a big letdown for him to go to his pro day and for it to be not just as bad, but for it not to be good enough to make it look like that was the reason why he was performing so bad at the combine. So,
or it's just a really good PR team that has cleaned up his mess. Like, is there a possibility someone tests so bad and then intentionally injures themselves?
Did you see the picture of his ankle?
No, I didn't. Oh, I heard it was bad though. I heard he had like a big bubble. Yeah,
it was bad. Like that would be some crazy PR though. Like dress it up with some makeup, some Sharpie, make it look professionally done. But Yeah, I didn't change it because no matter how you look at it, it's still a loss. But
yeah, I had a guy that I'm not nearly as high as the consensus is, and he didn't prove me right, he didn't prove me wrong, but Harold Fannin from Bowling Green was like a highly productive tight end in this last year's class. But he came in at about 6'3", 240, which puts himself in like the bottom 5% percentiles in size, and then comes out and he runs I believe a 4.71, maybe to a 4.73, which is pretty slow for a guy that's supposed to be a big slot receiver, a big mismatch, to come in. And I mean, the only guy I can think of that ever did that and became something is someone like Isaiah Likely, who is bigger and is a better receiver in my opinion. So, and is still a tight end too, as good as he is. So, to have that frame, to have that athletic profile that Fannin did, I think he's just very limited to a certain role now after seeing his measurables. So I think he comes out of this a little bit of a loser.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talk about the whole fluid thing. That it just didn't look like it. He kind of looked clunky. He was doing the gauntlet drill and like we were talking about getting pushed off your line. He was zigging. He was zigging and zagging, waving back and forth as the ball came at him. That was something I did manage to catch was Bannon. And yeah, that was the gauntlet drill was what I saw the most of. And yeah, it did not look promising for him. So that was definitely a good loser choice for the tight ends. So we'll move into the offensive line now. It's really all we have left. So big winner. Who'd you have?
I had a guy that I have top 10 in the entire class for me on my big board, Armand Membu out of the University of Missouri. He is a long-time right tackle that a lot of people think will be playing guard in the NFL because he looks kind of short on film. But he measured in at 6'4", 334 with 33-inch arms, which is just about the threshold of a offensive tackle. He came in and he ran a 4.91 40, which is insane for someone that weighs 334 pounds. And he looked fantastic in all the drills. He was super smooth, super fluid, on top of having arguably the cleanest tape in the class outside of Josh Simmons. So I think he cemented himself as a top 15, could be even a top 10 pick in the NFL draft.
Where did you have him? Did you say where you had him prior to the combine?
I had him. I haven't moved him yet. I had him as I think around somewhere from 10 to 12 on my big board, if I remember correctly. I'm really high on him. I do think his ceiling's higher at guard because of his stocky build and his movement skills, but he did show that he does have the length to play tackle, which was like his biggest question.
Yeah. Yeah, Armand Membu, you said was how you pronounce that, right? Do you know that's
what I said? No, might be Membao, might be something else.
All right, well, I will also, once again, for offensive line, kind of take low-hanging fruit. Will Campbell, I thought, put to rest any concern about him playing tackle. Like, I feel like that's been like the one thing that, maybe he should go inside. I thought he did the opposite as far as his measurables went from the combine. I know people still think he will project better as a guard post-combine. I think it's all about how you perceived his performance almost, because I did see some guys that I follow that were still saying, like, go inside, like, it'll still be best for you. But I thought from what I saw from him today that he still proved he could be the best regardless, he's the best offensive lineman in the draft. I still think he's the top guy. So I think he put to rest any sort of concern that you might have had of him playing tackle. So I thought that was good. I also wanted to note that your guy, Josh Simmons, too, I thought he was a big winner because from what I read, all the medicals came back pretty positive for Josh Simmons. So that's a guy that everyone has been docking because of his injury and potentially would be offensive tackle one, if he was healthy. But from what I understand, within these next couple of months, he'll be 100% back. So I thought hearing that was probably some of the biggest news and most overlooked from the entire weekend. Yeah,
and that's huge. As far as Will Campbell goes, I think some people do think that because there is like this threshold that exists for some teams of the 32 to 33 inch mark for arm length. The height they don't really care about, really. It's like arm length. And I think he got 32 and some change, just shy of 33. So he would be a little bit of an outlier at tackle, but I do think that he showed that he was athletic and fluid enough to kind of make up for some of the issues of length he might have. But I do think his ceiling's like better at guard. I think a lot of people's ceiling's better at guard. But I think that he absolutely showed that he can play tackle. I think his footwork was perfectly smooth. And I think that either way, I think that you could draft him in the top 10, top 5, and you can put him anywhere. I think that's actually the biggest takeaway is he can play probably 4 positions on the offensive line.
Yeah, that's a good point. His versatility will be, his biggest helping point. So who was your biggest loser of the offensive line?
Probably, again, a guy that I've been kind of low on that used to get even kind of some first-round hype, Wyatt Millam out of West Virginia. He was a left tackle at West Virginia that a lot of people ranked really high because he was like a PFF darling. Mm-hmm. Like he has some of the best grade, probably the highest graded offensive tackle from PFF last year. But he has very clunky feet. He's not great in open space. And he does have really short arms. So his are like an even 32-inch arms, which I don't think that he quite has the athleticism that like a Will Campbell has to kind of make up for it. He ran a 5.27, looked really slow and uncomfortable doing it, looked pretty slow and clunky in the drills. So I just think that really hurts his odds of ever really being a left tackle in the NFL. I think that he is a guard and will have to play guard. Mm. And he didn't look fantastic in the Senior Bowl doing that. So I'm a little bit worried about him. He might be a round 3, even later guy for some teams.
Yeah. I wonder, is that another guy that you had? Did you mention where you had him did you have that ranked pre-combine, post-combine?
Yes, I did because of the Senior Bowl. I was already a little bit lower on him before. I think I had a 2nd to a 3rd round grade on him on his left tackle tape, just because of the clunkiness and like the lack of NFL projection. But then the Senior Bowl going up against high-end athletes, and then his measurements kind of confirmed what I saw, which helped me drop him a little bit further.
Gotcha. Yeah, my loser, which another guy, depends on how you perceive it. Not sure you might have expected him to score well, but I felt like he scored worse than even some people might have thought. And that was Tyler Booker. Mm-hmm. The guy's humongous, so you're not always expecting him to be super athletic. But, I mean, the combine performance was just, it was kind of putrid, dare I say bad. I mean, he ran a 5.38 40, which, we're getting to a point where almost all of these guys, regardless of size and weight, they're somehow running like sub 5s, like on average, somehow. Like these 300 plus pound guys, and to run a 5.3, not the best look. And the agility was it just not there wasn't one aspect of it where I felt like, okay, his size won't actually be a detriment to him. And I felt like that was actually my takeaway. And probably not a first rounder anymore. He probably ends up falling toward the end of the first, maybe falls mid-second. But I do think it would have been nice to have like one aspect of his combine be like, okay, there is something here. He does. Yeah. He's not just this clunky oaf playing on the interior, blocking a nose tackle. Like he's a little bit more than that. But who knows? We'll see what system he ends up in. Of course, that will be.
Yeah, it'd have to be like a very minimal gap scheme where he can kind of just block the guy in front of him, not have to like worry too much about like peeling and reaching the second. Like he can't play in a Ben Johnson offense, or he has to get out in space and run and catch a linebacker in the second level. Like he's just gonna have to be a guy that pushes the guy in front of him. Like that's gonna be his role, and like that does limit where he gets drafted. I think some people would rather just pick a tackle and try and move him to guard. Yeah. Someone with athleticism rather than draft Booker in that role. So yeah, I think his length was good. His power is fantastic, but yeah, he was a slug. He's kind of like a wider than he is tall kind of player. And was even like less athletic than Osiris Torrance, who he kind of comps to. So not a good day for him.
No, I kind of felt bad because I mean, this guy was I would say not consensus first rounder, but I felt like a lot of people did have him going in the first 32. So I would say he definitely dropped out of there, or at least likely will. All right, so on to defense, if I am not mistaken. So we'll start with the defensive line, and I had a winner I was kind of eager to talk about. It feels like every year I kind of get like, there's like one guy I like a lot, and I found him this year. Like a couple of years ago, it was Kalijah Cansey. I loved Kalijah Cansey.
Yeah.
And now the undersized guy. And this year it's kind of the opposite. Darius Alexander out of Toledo.
Oh,
this guy's a fucking nutcase. Like, this guy is high motor. He's explosive. He's got the quickness. I actually got to watch more defensive players than I did offensive players, and Darius Alexander was a guy I watched a lot more of. I wasted time watching Darius Alexander, actually. Ran a 4.9 40 over 300 pounds. Talking about these guys over the 300-pound threshold, and he's a guy that he gets under five seconds. So that was huge. And a lot of the concerns that I was reading about, most of them are coaching points, like hand leverage and stuff of that nature, pad level. Nothing that I felt like was like I wouldn't draft him for that reason kind of thing.
No.
So yeah, I think the biggest thing too, which annoys the piss out of me, is his age and the concern about how old he is. It's like, we just saw Brendan Fisk last year. Like, aren't we done with the whole age thing being the biggest reason why you won't draft a guy in the first round? So
yeah,
I am a big fan of Darius Alexander. He's probably my guy in the draft now, just because of how much I kind of latched onto him.
Yeah, he's been one of mine. I think I had him as my D tackle 5 over even some really high end guys with an early second round grade. And I've even mocked him in the late first a few times after the Senior Bowl. So he dominated the Senior Bowl, killed everybody. Has fantastic athleticism for being like 300 pounds or a little bit over that. Like, I don't know if you've seen the clip of him getting a pick 6, but like,
yes,
it was the most athletic I've ever seen a D tackle move in my life. Like, it was ridiculous. And he has good run defense tape, really good pass rush tape. I know he's like going to be 26 at some point pretty soon, but he also was an offensive tackle to start his Toledo career as a redshirt freshman. So he's only been playing defensive tackle at the college level for so long. So yeah, I'm not that worried about his age either, considering all the development he's had the last few years.
Yeah, I think people, kind of the whole where was he before the combine compared to after. I was thinking like round 2 for sure, but now to me, I think he can go as high as the top 25. Like, I think he could be like around that range.
It'd be like, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like he like ticked every box. Like, he had a good Senior Bowl. He's got the athleticism. He's got the length. He's got the combine scores. Like, he's got everything. Like, what is there not to like about Darius Alexander is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. He's possibly the most well-rounded D-tackle prospect outside of Mason Graham in terms of like athleticism and size. What I was going to say earlier off your point was like, I've kind of been mocking him to the Eagles, which I hate doing. But like, they're losing Milton Williams. They're a team that isn't positioned to reach on a guy. Like, imagine getting a guy that has amazing, like a Milton Williams style of athleticism, but is just a better player and bigger. Like, that's terrifying. So I think that he was a huge winner from the combine.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably my defensive. I mean, I guess we'll get into that a little bit more because it kind of touches on my loser. But
yeah,
go ahead. Who's your winner?
I had Derek Harmon, who I think I had at my D tackle 3, maybe 4. He measured just shy of 6'5", 313 pounds. Jumped 34 inches. Not jumped. He had 34-inch arms, I believe, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, that is insane. On top of running a 4.95 at 313 pounds, he has fantastic tape. He is like a good like penetration style 3-tech, but he's like 313 pounds. Kind of similar to like a Daquan Jones type of player that is like a big penetration kind of guy. So really big fan of his tape, and then had crazy measurements and on-field work to prove for it. So really big fan of what Derek Harmon did today.
Derek Harmon for me is, because like I said, the defense is where I really honed in on this. Unfortunately, the offense I didn't get as much detail into, but the Harmon is to me probably like DT3 now, like after this weekend. So I think I feel like Graham and Grant are probably 1 and 2. I feel, but I think Harmon's right on the bubble, right following them. So he had a great weekend as well. He was a name that I left off just because I didn't want to talk about too many. But I had another winner actually I wanted to talk about too, and that was, I think it's Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Like, this guy, I mean, we all, if you watched anything about the defensive lineman from the combine earlier, when it began, like, he was the highest scorer I think, of all defensive linemen, and this guy was projected as an undrafted free agent. Like, I don't think he's even on PFF's big board. Like, no one even knows. No one really knew who this guy was.
No, he was like a rotational player at Georgia. Like, didn't have like a. No one knew if he was a D tackle or a D end. Like, kind of floated in between this land, and then just showed up at the combine, got an invite, and dominated.
Literally.
And now everyone knows his name. So like that was like the absolute epitome of this being a marketing thing. Yep. Everyone knows about him now, which is awesome.
Yeah, this is like what this kind of player is exactly what I think the combine is the best for. Like, I know last year and even this year the conversation applies. Like, why do we even do the combine anymore? Like, the best players don't even do anything. They don't even test. Like, it's a waste of time. But it's not, because guys like this, now we know their name. Now we've heard of these guys. They've given themselves a chance to put themselves on the radar of these organizations to be picked and their lives to be changed, even if it's in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So, Ingram Dawkins is, like you said, kind of the epitome of the NFL combine. So I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, running, I know he's not quite as heavy as some of the inside guys. He's only 276, but still a 4.8640 is pretty ridiculous. Like, for anybody of that stature. So I think hopefully he does get a late day 3 flyer, because he's definitely worthy of it. Who's your loser?
Walter Nolan. Out of Ole Miss. He's a guy that I am also not quite as high on as consensus. I kind of have him more as a bubble first, second than a like top 15 pick, like a lot of people think he is. He's a guy that his really only super redeeming quality was like hyper athleticism, and then he didn't compete. And then it also came out that people don't like his personality at all. So like in a class that has guys like Derek Harmon and Darius Alexander, I can see a team dropping Walter Nolan off their board now, or like at least off their top 15, top 20 board, and take somebody else instead, because people don't like him, and he didn't even show off his athleticism. So is that who you had?
He was one of my losers. Yeah, I think, Mason Graham and Ken Grant, like not testing is one thing, but it felt like Walter was one of those guys that kind of did that had a lot to gain from testing. Like, he could have put himself into that conversation with Graham and maybe with Grant, but by not doing so, he keeps himself on the bubble. And there were other guys that tested that, like Darius Alexander, for example, that now, in my opinion, are rivaling him in the late first, or that could be picked over him. And he's losing money himself. Like, this is on him.
Yes.
But by not testing, and like you said, the concerns about his character were coming out too. So there wasn't much to like about Walter Nolan this weekend. It's like he's got tape. That's really about it at this point.
Yeah, we learned he has sufficient arm length, just on the bubble of it. Like, that is the only thing positive that we really learned from him out of this combine. And we learned a few negative things. So again, it being a marketing thing, he did not do a good enough job getting his name in a positive light. And now we come away with a negative light for Walter Nolan, which is not what you should be doing. So yeah, he gets the loser tag for me.
Yeah, definitely. My other loser, and this is not necessarily going to be what the average person would think, but I have JJ Pegasus. I can't pronounce his fucking name. And this is the complete opposite of what you would think coming out of this weekend, because we heard his name a lot for positive reasons because of him playing fullback and, doing offensive drills and all of that fun jazz. But I feel like there was nothing about what he did that in the grand scheme made me want to draft him more, which is really the whole point of all of this. It's like, you're supposed to rise your draft stock at the NFL Combine. And, he had 7 rushing touchdowns. Like, we already knew that. And, he ran like an out and up against air and caught it. Like,
yeah, it was good, but
like I wasn't moved. Like,
no, he's kind of, he lacks length. And for a guy that's like supposed to have crazy athleticism, didn't really test that crazy.
No,
I had him as like a 4th to 5th round pick on my board. That's probably where he'll stay. He didn't really improve anything. I don't think him having fullback versatility outside of maybe like 2 or 3 plays a game at best would really improve his stock for me. So yeah, that's not a bad pick at all.
Yeah, I think loser is a strong term, but I wanted to talk about it because the perception was, oh, how cool and how awesome it is that this 310-pound man is, running routes and he could be a fullback. And it's like, he's not going to be Kyle Juszczyk. The dude is like 80 pounds heavier. So let's get that out of everyone's mind. And that's what I think people see fullback, and that's what they think. It's like Juszczyk is like the gold standard. Like at best, this guy's like Scott Matlock. Like
yes. I don't know. Yeah. It worked with Pat Ricard to put a late round D tackle at fullback.
Mm-hmm.
He's an outlier for like how good of a blocker he is. He has great length, but is also compact. Like it's not a very common thing. So I don't think everybody should be drafting a guy in the 4th or 5th round to try and do that.
Right. And like you said, he didn't test well either. So I didn't
know.
Maybe if he tested well and people were just overlooking the fact that, he still is going to be a pretty solid tackle prospect, then fine. But that didn't even happen. It's like people were only focusing on him catching that one ball in that drill because there was nothing else to focus on. That was kind of how I felt about it.
That's fair. Yeah.
So we'll move on to defensive ends, and I'm going to steal the obvious one early just to get it out of the way. We don't have to talk about it much, but Shamar Stewart, that was insane for every reason, but it definitely entertained some interesting conversation because we kind of knew he was insanely athletic already. And all we did was really kind of quantify that with a number. So, you could watch his tape and you're like, okay, yeah, this guy's insane. This guy's a freak. And then he just goes to the combine and puts up insane numbers. And I think it was certainly still better than what people expected, of course. But
yes,
he still was, it still was a great weekend.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't expecting a 270-pound man to jump a 40-inch vert. Like almost like set the record for broad jump, 34-inch arms, which again is monstrous. Like that dude tested, he had the literal perfect combine. Like people seem to like his personality. Like he literally improved his stock in the best way possible, possibly to a top 10 pick if someone like the Panthers or Saints are willing to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it, and I know a lot of people. Well, it's like seeing people, he had the Myles Garrett athletic score, so let's comp him to Myles Garrett. It's
don't relax.
That. Yeah, don't do that. And then there are other people, and then there's the opposite of people like, he didn't produce in college, so he's not shit. So who cares about his combine score? It's like then there's those people. But I don't know. I think at best, there's in my opinion, no solidified second edge rusher in this class. Like I feel like outside of Carter at 1, 2 is subjective depending on who you 100%. Ask. So
100%.
He was somebody that probably was on the bubble of that 2 conversation, but now after this, if you took him at 10, 12, 8, you're like, that makes complete sense because of his combine performance and what we know on tape. And that's kind of the winning aspect of the weekend.
Yeah.
He justified being edge rusher 2.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense because I comped him to Jadeveon Clowney for a bit, of a guy with like crazy length, crazy power, never really a productive pass rusher, but like monster run defender, and has made a lot of money doing it. So, and was the first overall pick. So wouldn't be too crazy if we saw someone like Shamar Stewart do that pretty similarly.
I saw to the whole production argument. I saw Anthony Reinhardt, who we just had on a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. He put out a chart about the pass rush win rate of the last 2 college seasons for edge rushers dating back to 2016, and he filtered it by round. So the pass rush win rate in those last 2 seasons on average for like round 1 picks was like 16.2% or something like that. And then as it went through the rounds, it didn't actually directly correlate to like production and draft selection didn't actually correlate. Like you'd expect round 1 to be the highest pass rush win rate guys. And that was the case, but then round 2 was like 14.6%. Then round 3 was like 14.8%. It was fluctuating up and down. So it kind of, it's not Bible, of course, but my takeaway of that was, the production isn't necessarily, it doesn't matter. We kind of already.
It doesn't always. Like there's always like a production and measurables darling that the data nerds kind of like suck their teeth into. And it recently was Andre Carter from Army. Like he went to the Vikings, or people thought that he was like 6'6" and like had really good testing and like fantastic sack production, and everyone thought like he was the next best thing, and now no one knows who he is. So like, yeah, I'm not obsessed with that. Like, you have to watch the film, and he had fantastic, and Shamar Stewart had fantastic film.
Yeah, and like it's weird because the same people that are screaming Shamar Stewart's production sucked when his 13.2% win rate wasn't even that much of an outlier, aren't screaming that Josiah Stewart should be a first round pick because he's got a 23% pass rush win rate in the last 2 seasons in college. So it's just something that people aren't thinking about. It feels like a hate campaign against Stewart because of how well he tested. So I do think he, like I said, can be justified as edge rusher 2 coming out of the weekend.
100%. Yeah. I did have him as my number 2 because my number 1, it would be an injustice. It would be an injustice if I didn't do it. Donovan Ezeraku has been my guy forever. He had 2 questions. He had 2 questions coming into the draft. Like, does he have enough length? Because we knew he was 6'2", which is pretty short. And does he have enough like explosive athleticism? He came in at 6'2", but he had 34-inch arms, which is like a ridiculously perfect build. That's like a Von Miller type of build where like you have the compact build to have crazy bend, but have long enough arms to separate yourself from the tackle, which is perfect. And then he also dominated the both of the shuttle runs. So like he clearly has like this crazy like short area quickness to go along with being the best actual pass rusher in the draft. So now that I'm starting to see some people comping him in the first round after this, I had to let people know that I was first. Mm-hmm. I was always first since the fall. And now that he's here and he measured really well and he tested really well, we might see it in the first, which would be my job is done.
When I first reached out to you to do this, I think your bio said Ezeraku believer. Whatever it said, I think it's still in there now. Whatever it was, back then too. So you have been on the Ezeraku bandwagon, and I can bear witness. I can back that up that he has been for quite a while now. My other guy that I wanted to mention, and this was more of a brief mention because it's a late round guy anyway, but I don't know if I can pronounce his name either. Fadil Diggs, I think.
Fadil Diggs from Syracuse?
Yes, out of Syracuse. Mm-hmm. And, at best, he's probably like a situational edge rusher. Like you throw him in on like an obvious passing down on third down. But the interesting part was his versatility. Like the guy could probably be like a rough linebacker if you really needed him to. Mm-hmm. Like rough around the edges kind of guy playing that position because he's got the speed to do it. The guy ran a 4.457 40. He had, his splits were very good. He had a good explosive grade per athletic score. Yeah. So I thought it was pretty interesting to see a guy that was primarily dominating on edge at the edge position, but still able to, run with linebackers in coverage. I feel like he was reactionary enough to play and drop out in coverage if he had to. So I think that was kind of the saving grace for him, was just seeing that he's got the production at the edge spot, but also could be that versatile player. So to me, he went from like maybe mid 6 to maybe early day 3 selection. So I thought he deserved mention.
100%. Yeah. I mean, also like the edge rusher class is not very deep. It kind of falls off pretty hard after like the 3rd round. So having a guy like that can kind of like, again, like make a name for himself and get people talking about him afterwards is going to be huge. And he might jump a round or 2.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's exactly what he did. So we'll move on to linebacker. Do you have 1 or 2? Do you have 1 or 2 winners?
I have kind of 3 that I can kind of talk about. So if you have one in particular you want to get off your chest, I don't have that one.
Okay. I have one I'll speak to. I have Danny Stutzman. And Stutzman, the Oklahoma product, he was far more athletic than I think people expected the old white boy to be to go into the weekend as. And 4.5 was pretty damn good for Stutzman. And he's kind of just your old school guy, your old school middle linebacker. It's really the best way to describe him. And I think he's a great tackler. He can play coverage. He can pursue the quarterback. Like he's kind of got it all. And I think linebacker is always, I think linebacker out of any position in football when it comes to the NFL draft is the most, I keep using the word subjective, but subjective for organizations and front offices. If they feel like they need a linebacker, I feel like positional value goes out the window. They'll be like, Stutzman might be a guy that works for a team at the end of the third round, but because a team at the end of the second round has a chance to take him, they'll do it, and they won't think twice about it. And
I mean,
that's what I was thinking with Stutzman.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that like mentally, toughness, like leadership, like everyone knew he had those, and the only real questions were like, is he a good enough athlete to play middle linebacker in the NFL? And like, I think he proved that. I just don't think that he really had to at Oklahoma, and I think that he kind of proved that he has that in his bag, and he can still get better at it. So I think that he definitely boosted himself. I think I have him as my linebacker 4, maybe 3. Which is a lot higher than a lot of people have him. So I already felt good things, and I feel even better things now that seeing he can run and he can jump.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think outside of Campbell, like who really is linebacker 2, who's linebacker 3, like it's another position that's kind of up in the air. So maybe it'll be Stutzman that gets taken as the second backer. Who knows?
Yeah, that kind of gets me to my the linebacker 1. Carson Schlesinger out of UCLA is my linebacker 1 of this season. He is by far the best tape of any linebacker I watched this season. And he kind of he's this guy that came on to UCLA as a skinny freshman, as a walk-on. And he worked his way up, got to about 225, 230, and was received All-American honors and was a Butkus Award finalist this season. Possibly the best instincts I've ever seen from a linebacker prospect after only 1 year of starting. So we thought he'd come in about 230 as like a mediocre athlete, walked in at just shy of 245 and had a 39.5-inch vertical. So this guy that walks in with like only athleticism and size questions came in humongous and jumped out of the gym. So I think that kind of cements him as my linebacker 1.
Wow. Yeah, I did not see that one coming. And that's a hot take. It's probably your hottest take. That might be your hottest draft take. I could be wrong, but it probably
he was on the border with Jahad Campbell, because I think Jahad Campbell's tape can be a little bit underwhelming because he's also kind of new to the position. But he's not nearly as instinctual. He's like all size and athleticism. And I think that he'll kind of have to play like a joker role a little bit, kind of be moved around the formation and just be an athlete. I think that Schlesinger can be like a starting middle linebacker for all 3 downs, can start immediately, especially knowing he's big now. Like that's actually that's humongous. But I do have Campbell as my linebacker 2. And he also had a fantastic combine, which I would like wanting to touch on briefly. But yeah, they were both fantastic.
Yeah, Campbell's interesting. I mean, it sounds like he can go as high as like 18th or 19th in the first round, and maybe he falls to the end of the first, but it begs the question, like, why is it, like, to me, I feel like I haven't seen enough from Campbell to make him this solidified first linebacker the way that it feels like he kind of is. Like no other linebacker is being projected in the first round, but he is like mid first, and that's like pretty crazy for a linebacker. I mean, so
he was productive. I think he's going to be fantastic. Like he was. I mean, I have an early second on him. Really good athlete. He's really long, really big. Kind of was like a former edge rusher, so he kind of does have like that pass rush bag to him. But he does look good in coverage so far. Like he looks pretty slick. He's a guy I would never trust in like man coverage. Like I'm not putting him in on third down long. Like I'm not having him play the top in Tampa 2. So that's why I kind of give Schlesinger like the upside over him, because he can do that. But guys like Jahad Campbell like still deserve to be really premium draft picks for the right team.
Off topic, but I have to ask: is Jalen Walker a linebacker or an edge rusher?
God, I don't think he's a good linebacker. I think that he would have to play edge rusher. That's where all of his best tape was. But he came in at like 6'1" and didn't have great length or size. I'm not nearly as high on Jalen Walker. I think somebody that blitzes a ton and can like move a guy around could get a great player, but I don't think he's like a Bill or a Bengal. Like kind of teams that run pretty base formations and just have them rush. I don't think he could do that for them.
Sounds like a Brian Flores kind of guy is what you're getting at.
Yeah. He's not nearly as high on my board as a lot of people, and he didn't measure well at all.
Yeah, when I was doing my research, I'm I was trying to find Jalen Walker like in the edge rusher category. And I'm like, where is this guy? And I was like, oh, he's also a linebacker, and it sounds like he's not that good at it. So why is he classified as one? But then, once we saw his combine measurements, it's like, well, he doesn't necessarily have the measurements to be a good edge rusher either. So it's like, what do you do with this guy? And I think that's kind of, we talk about it. Like, we talked to like a Diami Brown, for example. It's like these guys that potentially could do different things, but aren't necessarily good at one thing. Yeah. Sometimes versatility is good, but also at times it could be the Achilles heel because they don't end up fitting anywhere, trying to find a spot. So, I think a team could get in trouble taking him a bit too high, but I had to ask what your thoughts were on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the NFL is pretty polarized on him too, so I'm curious to know where he goes.
Yeah, that will be interesting. My loser for the linebackers, I'm kind of sad to say it because I like him a lot, but I have Pupal. Pupal, he's just so undersized. And like we were saying earlier, when you're undersized, you have to prove you are flat out athletic. And I didn't get that from him this weekend. He didn't run the fastest 40 ever. He didn't do any agility testing, which I kind of thought was weird. His explosiveness was fine, but I don't know. A guy that's only 6'1", 220, like you kind of got to be, running out of the building, like you said, and he didn't really do that. So
no. Yeah. And there are exceptions to that rule, but very few. But there are also guys that are a little bit more physical and a little bit more thick, like Ivan Pace Jr., for example. Mm-hmm. I was pretty high on him coming out of the draft, but he is like a thickly, densely built, like deconstructs blocks at a high level, uses really good power to win. And I don't think that Paul does that. I think that he's kind of like a more finesse guy. But he's 220 pounds and has really tiny arms. He has like 29-inch arms. So his tackle radius is going to be pretty small. He's going to have to really hit everybody with the shoulder, which is going to be hard to do. And to run like a 4.63, like that's not inspiring at all for him. So he's definitely the non-winner on my board.
Yeah, was he your top loser?
Yeah, I had him, and briefly I put Jay Higgins from Iowa. Yeah. Came at like 6 foot flat, like 225, and ran horrendously, and then jumped horrendously. I know he's a guy that like is all IQ and toughness. Like no one expected him to do well, but he did like so much worse and was smaller than a lot of people thought. So he also is going to be a lot lower on my board than I probably thought before.
Yeah, these guys, I didn't feel like there were really many other options as far as fallers for linebacker went, but no. I did see people like but he has the heart, but he's a good guy kind of thing. It's like,
yeah, awesome. He can be a good coach.
It only goes so far, man. Like, that's why I felt bad because I saw some of his interviews. I saw some of Pooh's interviews, and I'm like, man, he seems like such a good guy.
And he could be good, but like part of like the draft analysis thing is like we're scouting for all 32 teams, so there might be teams that could take advantage of him and like do really well with him, but like in a general sense, like when we're scouting him for 32 football teams, he does not fit all 32 football teams at all. Yeah. He probably wouldn't start on like 31 of them.
Yeah, well, we'll move on to our final position on that note, and that would be the defensive backs. I kind of lumped them all together.
Okay.
I didn't necessarily. I mean, I guess I kind of did. I have guys for both positions. I'm going to start with safety, though, and take the East down because I feel like he potentially put himself on the Bills' radar, and that's Nick Emenwari. Like, this guy, I feel like is exactly what Buffalo's defense needs. Like, Matt Milano is the guy that potentially we don't have next year. Taylor Rapp is somebody that was like a key contributor to the Bills' defense, and a strong safety like Nick, 6'2", 186. Like, this guy played. What I understand, he played in the box often. Like, I mean, you can't have a better combine. Him and Shamar, like they had the ideal combine weekend. 4.28 is insane to run, for anybody, but for a safety nonetheless. Like we're not even talking about a corner here. Like we're talking about a strong safety. Like this might be a stretch, but might be the closest thing we've seen to Derwin in a bit. So I was excited to see that, and I as a Bills fan put a tab on the board that had his name on it, because I think he could fit very well playing in the box for Buffalo, just kind of like what we had Taylor Rapp doing. So excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's always a big safety in every draft. There's always the guy that's 6'3", 220 that tests out of this world. But he has better tape than most of those. Like, trying to comp him, like, you look at guys like, you're like, is he Derwin James? Is he Jeremy Chin? Is he TJ McDonald? Like, which of these, like, in what range does he fit these big safeties? But when he comes in, he runs that time. He jumps 43 inches up, and he jumps 11.6 broad jump. Is out of this world. Ridiculous to weigh 220 at 6'3". And he has his things. Like, he's pretty high-hipped. His transitions and coverage aren't perfect. Like, he has his limitations. But, like, imagine a guy, like, that can take over Taylor Rapp's role that is, like, 4 inches taller and severely more athletic with a much better tackle radius, much better in coverage. Like, you take that. You will absolutely take that. So he was absolutely my safety winner, and comfortably so. I don't even have an honorable mention.
I think, dare I say, Malachi Starks has been like the consensus safety one for, it feels like 10 years. Like, I don't know. Anytime you hear a safety, everyone's first thought is Malachi Starks. But I mean, after seeing that combine, seeing what he put on tape, like, to me, I think he could rival Malachi. And I guess it also is just the preference of safety you want to. So, you know, if you want a strong safety, you go Nick. If you want more of a ball hawk, you know, coverage guy, then, you know, Malachi's probably more your taste. But I think Nick is, you know, he'll run with a tight end. Like, that whole tight end matchup nightmare thing that, like, a Travis Kelce has haunted us with. Like,
yes,
Nick is your Travis Kelce eraser.
100%.
So
yeah,
that's what I want for the Bills to do, I think, at the end of
I actually had Malachi Starks as the loser of this, not because he even did bad. Like, he was actually so his measurements were fine, his tape was fine, but, like, he was actually so smooth in the on-field drills. Like, I think that he was, like, actually separated himself in the on-field drills. Like, his footwork was smooth, his hips were smooth, his instincts were the best in the class. But Nick Emenwari is the reason he was the loser. Like, it wasn't that he did anything wrong. It was just that this other safety came in and put up DK Metcalf numbers. So that's the entire reason he's the loser out of the safety group. But I do think he's still comfortably my safety one, just because of, like, the tape that he's put on before. I think he did get cooked a few times by guys like Ryan Williams. But what other safety gets to cover Ryan Williams in one-on-one and man? Like, nobody else is good enough to even get that assignment. So I'm not too worried about him yet, but Emenwari closed the gap a little bit for sure.
Yeah, I think Malachi, well, I don't know. I think at this point, where would you draft Emenwari at the end of one where people are projecting Starks? Is that a reach?
Yeah, I would do that. If you have the right defense. Again, someone like the Bengals, no. Someone that would just use him as, like, a traditional strong safety, no. But somebody like a Dan Quinn that kind of likes to draft these big safeties and kind of move them around. Like, they've been doing it with, like, Marquise Bell, and they've done it with other guys. To have a guy like that would be huge for someone like them. So I think it's a really good pick if you know how to use them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hope he's definitely on Buffalo's radar. It's like weird. Like, for me as a Bills fan, seeing him, it's like it might be a little early to take him at the end of one, but then he's probably not there by the time he comes back around.
He will not be at the end of the two. No. So no, he's a monster, and I think that he probably has earned himself a pretty solid first-round grade.
Yeah, I agree. Well, my other, I have a couple other defensive backs that I wanted to touch on winners-wise. Maxwell Hairston, another guy that a popular winner, 21 years old, not quite 6 foot, but 5'11", I think is enough. 183, man coverage guy, a big man coverage guy, and the athletic ability. You got to be athletic to play man coverage. It goes hand in hand if you want to keep up with some of these receivers nowadays. And he ran another guy that ran a very, very lightning fast 40, and the thing that helped his stock too was his Senior Bowl performance. Like he I guess dominated one-on-one. So seeing that he put the combine results to the film, to the Senior Bowl, the whole idea of checking all the boxes every opportunity he's gotten, I feel like he's done that. And Maxwell also was, zone capabilities too. I feel like he's a guy that can do both.
Yeah, he's a guy I already had published before this. Like, I have it in writing. He is my corner 9 in a firm second round grade. So I already did like what I saw on him. But the combine also just kind of proved that, because I actually didn't think he had that kind of long speed at all, which might just be from like a stamina issue or a technique issue. But like he proved that he can do it, and he can be the fastest player in this class, like he just showed he was, which is fantastic for somebody that is in such like a congested corner class.
Yeah, it is a weird group. Like other than the the consensus one. I don't know. I feel like it another group that you're kind of like, depending on what you're into, what your taste is.
Yeah,
maybe Maxwell goes at the end of one as well. Like I feel like that might be a little rich, but I still think it's possible. I wouldn't hate it.
It's rich, but it happens every year. Like that's what I try to tell people when they see a mock and they try and dissect it and pick it apart. I'm like, the actual NFL draft is so much crazier than all of these mocks that you could possibly come up with. Like, people are trading up. People are getting guys like Penix when they already have a quarterback for 50 mil. Like, yes, it's a stupid pick. It happens every year. So someone that just tested out his shoes in Maxwell Harrison with good tape in the SEC, I can see it happening.
Yeah. Did you have any other winners?
Yeah, I mean, like you talk about somebody that kind of is a corner of your taste. Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State is a guy that is my taste. Like a super physical, super athletic outside corner that can play out the slot. He did measure really short. He's only about 5'9", 5'10", but he has 30-inch arms, which is like the same as someone like Harrison. So you're short, but you have length, which is perfect. And when you run a 4.35, which is really good for someone short, with a 37.5-inch vertical,
I was gonna say,
it makes me feel.
What was his jumping?
Yeah, he jumped 37.5 inches, which is top 5 in the corner class. So it kind of gives you hope that like he still can play on the perimeter when he can absolutely keep up and contest those catches, as well as being arguably the best run defending corner in the class. I do have a thing for former wrestlers. It's just my thing. His brother wrestled at Nebraska. Like, he's an absolute beast mentally, physically, and it's just one of the best man coverage corners in the class. So Jacob Parrish firmly cemented himself as a second round pick for me.
Yeah, I don't want to go on record saying this. He was the shortest defensive back, but he was definitely right there. But he, being the undersized guy, he kind of eased your emotions about somebody that was a little bit shorter. So I was going to also ask, but you touched. I mean, you painted the whole picture. But how he was as a run defender, because obviously playing out of the slot, you're going to have to be a little bit more physical at times. So the fact that I like to hear those kinds of things about Jacob Parrish being the shorter guy, he's willing to get his nose dirty.
Oh, yeah.
My final winner that I wanted to touch on was Za Frazier. I think.
Yes.
I think it's Za. This guy, talk about tools. He's 6'2", 186. This is the kind of guy that my Bills would probably drool over. It's the long arms kind of thing, tall guy.
Kyer Elam.
Yeah, so literally the Kyer Elam clone. And I feel odd, saying I like him right now and he was a winner, and then hating on Kyer because of the way that all went down. But yeah, I mean, I think he's got the tape and the traits. So he's a guy that probably was a day 3, round 4 pick, but maybe he ends up going late round 2 because people are that infatuated with his size and what they saw, because he can probably, he plays a lot of man, but because of his height, you could probably throw him in zone 2.
Yeah, I mean, this like borderline like 6'4" corner with like crazy arm length with like 33-inch arms. That's like an offensive tackle on top of like running like a 4.35. Like, it actually hasn't been that long since a corner from UTSA has done that. Also, Tariq Woolen did that like 3-4 years ago, which is kind of insane. But like, yeah, he's a guy I hadn't really heard much about, honestly, up until I saw he was on the combine list. I watched like a minute of his tape. It looked really good, but I didn't watch more. And now I'm definitely going to watch more after he just kind of was top 5 in like every category. So definitely going to tune in and watch his tape, because that dude was a freak.
Yeah, Zai, I saw the measurables. I'm like, golly, bro, this guy's this is a man right here. That's a man playing corner out there. So I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see where he goes. But did you have any other winners, or you want to get into your losers?
I didn't really have many other winners. I had Harrison and Parrish as my two winners for that. I actually just lumped both Kansas corners together as my losers, Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson. Kobe especially had so much hype, and I even was like flamed multiple times for not having him in my top 10 corners in a stacked corner class, mind you. But he measured in at even heavier than we thought, but only at like 180 pounds, and then was one of the slowest corners in the class. Ran like a 4, I think like a late 4.5. He's a guy that's scrappy, has some fun tape, but like athleticism and size questions are absolutely there. So I think some of the top 10 corner hype is becoming a little bit unwarranted, just because people like him.
Yeah. People will flame you for like the weirdest things. It's like this is like you said, it's a mixed bag of defensive backs, it feels like. And because you have a negative opinion about one of the many guys out there, it's like,
yeah,
it's not like you're talking shit on, like, it's not like you're sitting here trying to drag down Nick Imamori after his great combine performance or anything like that. It's like a completely reasonable criticism.
Yeah, I think a late first, early second on him, and everyone's like, "Oh, he should be a top 10." I'm like, okay, well, all right.
Well, I also didn't really have that big of a loser, but it was kind of one of those things where he lost out because he didn't participate. Xavier Watts was, kind of my guy for that. Like, you have a guy like Nick go out there and dominate, and even though Starks didn't do everything, he still kind of proved that he proved that fluidness. He was smooth. He looked good with his feet, doing what he did do. So I think, Nick and Xavier were probably the two guys battling for safety too. Nick went out there and, in my opinion, is now battling with Malachi for safety 1, and Xavier is just kind of like standing there because he chose not to do anything. So that was a big loss, in my opinion.
Yeah, and his main questions were athleticism. So unless he was just so confident that he was going to test horribly, like, you should have at least given it a shot. Like, if he ran a 4.5, nobody was going to be surprised. Like, that's what he is on tape. So, like, at least go out there and try. No one was going to hold that against you. No one thought he was going to run a 4.2. So go out there and test and like look competitive, look like you like want to earn a higher spot. But yeah, I don't really know why. He has some of like the most fluid coverage of any safety in the class, so it's kind of shocking to like not see him out there doing drills. But yeah, I definitely call him a loser for that then.
Yeah. Who's your loser?
I only put both Kansas corners.
Yeah, you did.
So I had, I also had Mello Dotson, who ran like a 4.6, which is insane for a corner. So yeah, I just lumped them both together.
Yeah, you did say that. Oh my God, I'm losing it. All right. There was one other guy that I somehow didn't mention. Did we do losers for defensive ends? I don't remember.
No, actually, and I had 2.
Yeah, I had one too that I didn't talk about, and I'm like looking at him, I'm like, wait, I did not talk about him. So I kind of wanted to throw my 2 cents in. It was Mike Green. Like,
yeah,
there was Mike Green kind of had the same issue that Walter Nolan had. Like, he didn't really do anything, and being, at least in Mike's case, an undersized guy. His tape and his measurables. His tape has helped ease his measurables, and he's shown he's athletic. Another former wrestler. He's ranked highly for a reason, but not testing because of a hamstring strain pretty much sucks. And then he had to spend a lot of the weekend battling character concerns and how he has like 2 sexual assault allegations against him, like from high school and college. It's like, maybe at least if he tested and he tested well, he could have been able to like deflect it with some of that, but he couldn't. And now guys like, Shamar and even James Pierce, who had a polarizing weekend of his own, still tested pretty well. And, Mike Green was a guy, in my opinion, that was in the Edge 2, Edge 3 conversation, and he still is, but I think there are guys that will probably be taken before him by most teams because of things that were highlighted this weekend. So he was a big loser for me.
I had Mike Green and James Pierce as like my 2 losers of the draft, and neither of them for anything that they did wrong on the field. It was just the fact that we're coming away from them both with character concerns in such a stacked edge rusher class is only going to make them fall. Like, yeah, you can like James Pierce ran one of the fastest 40-yard dashes from an edge ever with a hoodie on. He ran a 2.45. That's absurd at 6'5", and he looked incredible in all the drills. But we're coming away from him with like all these reports of him being like the most uncoachable player ever, and that like everyone wanted him gone. And then Mike Green is battling 2 separate sexual abuse allegations or assault allegations. Like, regardless of how well Mike Green would have tested, and he would have tested out of this world, like they're coming away with really sour tastes, and some people will probably take them off their boards completely.
Yeah,
so it's weird.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, that's not shit that, obviously you're messing with. So, yeah, Mike Green, not good. And James Pierce, I feel like it was another guy that had a weekend that you either, it was all about your perception of it. Like, if I read the right thing, he, I guess, like, forgot his shirt or something and then just worked out in a hoodie. Like, that's just weird. Like, it's just, for the way that he's been trending and with all the rumors about his character, like, that's not a big deal. But like if Pooh Paul did that, it's like, okay, it's Pooh Paul. But but Mike Green, but James Pierce does it. The guy that's like an apparent crash out. Oh, he forgets his shirt. Yeah, that guy doesn't give a fuck. And now that's what it's all going to turn into. But yeah, that guy, where does he go? Because it's like, from a lot of what I see, he's the second best edge rusher, but he's got so much baggage. It's like he might fall out of the first round. So what happens? With him.
Also, Philadelphia, like they have been perfectly keen to pick up all these character concerns. Jalen Carter did what he did, and he's one of the best defensive tackles, and no one cares anymore. So that might just happen with Philadelphia too, and he actually perfectly fits the kind of scheme they run. So that could also happen if for whatever reason he completely falls out of the first in such a stacked class. If someone puts Ezraku over him, I can see them doing that. Guys like Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart will probably be over him now. So he could easily fall out of the first or fall to the very last pick of the first.
Yeah, that will be a sad day for the NFL if he gets to 32, because Howie Roseman will not hit a button faster ever in his life.
He doesn't care. Yeah.
he will ham on that draft button as hard as he can. But I think that was really all I had to. Holy shit! I changed tabs and my computer broke. Am I still here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep talking. I think that was really all I had for the combine. I mean, we touched on, I feel like, a lot of guys, so I think we painted a good picture for the weekend. If you missed out, so if you have any closing thoughts, feel free to dish them out.
Really, it's just like that was the last of what we're gonna see. From any new information about the draft. So we're about to kind of, like, after free agency is going to be starting in what, like 8 days?
8 days.
Is that when the tampering period starts? So that's the last of the information we're going to get about the prospects. Once the tampering period's kind of done, we'll have an idea of how the rosters are going to look and what holes need fixed. So with the draft coming up a little bit after that, we're going to have a really good idea of who's going where. So we'll be with you for that. We'll be with you through the tampering period. We'll be with you through the draft. So we have a stacked off season ahead of us.
Yeah, we do, and this is the most exciting time of year for Austin. He's a big draft guy, and even I love it just as much. So this is going to be. I can't wait to put my mock together and really dive headfirst into all of that. So definitely stick around for future installments. But for now, if you enjoyed, like, subscribe, comment, share. Be sure you are following us individually. All our socials are down below. Be sure you're following Against the Blitz. All of the socials for the pod down below as well. And we will see you in the next one.
Mm-hmm.